Well, I started working on this old portable video cassette recorder. It's a VGP 150 by RCA. This thing is 30 years old. This is the recorder side of it. The tuner and clock and power unit are a separate unit. I currently have those powered up, except just turned off. And I've always enjoyed using this VCR, but as most of them of this vintage, being 30 years old, the belts go bad. In fact, they've actually disintegrated into a goo, and I have been able to get replacements, but I'm still working to try to get this normalized. This amounts to a significant amount of work. You have to remove the front panel, basically the case. Not very difficult to do that. To access the internal parts, what's happened here is I've got it turned over. This area back here being the bottom, you take the bottom plate off, which is this. And I turn it upside down because I just learned in a significant piece of disassembly, and that is once you unhinge the control front panel, you're able to lift the whole circuit board off the back of this thing to access the one of the motors. I'm suspicious that the rewind and forward motor is giving trouble. I'm going to try to look at that. But anyway, meanwhile, I'm going to string this up and hold it up in the air to a bracket that I have up here, so that I can work on this without damaging, hopefully, any parts. Well, I've gotten this unit uncovered on the backside. Unfortunately, there isn't really a lot of serviceable parts back here, but it does give you a clue as to how this unit runs. There's 1, 2, 3 motors on this side. This pancake motor I thought might have a belt back here, but it really is not. It's just the back side of it with the coils showing. I will put this cover back on here just so for anyone else's benefit and knowledge. As you can see, the unit does have a fuse over here, right there. And as I said, I strung this circuitry up with a bungee cord to hold it out of the way so I could work on the bottom if I needed to. I did learn, of course, there's one contact switch here, which is probably what stopped this thing from operating when I was trying to use the other side. But on this side, there's really not much to do, unless, of course, you had to remove one of the motors. This appears to be the motor that drives the rewind, the fast forward, and probably play of the unit. And, of course, I did replace the belt for the counter, and this actually does turn the one drive wheel, so I'm not sure if it needs further cleaning. I'm going to reassemble this thing and work from the top when I check it over here. Now, before I was going to put this back together, I was checking over the capacitors and other circuitry just to be sure nothing was obviously blowing. Can't find anything. There's a few capacitors that have a translucent cover on the top where they have that split top on there, but those are okay. I haven't seen anything that appears to be ruined. There's actually a second fuse on this unit right here, in addition to the one on this end here. So this VCR has 2 fuses. Very tough to access if you had to replace one or they blew. You know, you'd have to basically disassemble this like I've done here to get at this one. This back here, I'm assuming would be part of the tuner of the unit. Or one of these, probably this actually. And I'm not an electronics expert, enough to talk about this. But anyhow, I've looked this over. I can't see anything ruined as far as the circuitry is concerned. I just have to deal with these motors and try to get the belts correct and clean this up a little bit. Now, for orientation purposes, this area in here is the area where the cassette actually is played in. If you flip this over, the cassette gets mounted into here, so this motor here would be a key motor for the purposes of play and such, record and the functions of that. This is the motor for the head, if I haven't already said. That's the play head. And I don't believe there's another motor on the top side, so at least I've counted 3 motors on this unit to now. Yeah, these VCR, these players are somewhat tricky. They have a lot of switches. There's one here, as I was pointing out before, micro switch mounted back here. Obviously the case enclosure is closed, and of course this is probably what indicates to the machine that it's supposed to be operational when you have a tape in there. So that's one switch that would have to be closed. I've just kind of cleaned up a couple of cap stands with some alcohol on some cotton, I should say spindles, pulleys. Before I close this side up. Okay, here's the 4th motor at the back of the unit. It drives the longest belt in this unit, and I really can't clean these pulleys because they're almost inaccessible. But fortunately, the belt that I replaced in here, that's in here now, it was clean. In fact, it's actually intact. It had not deteriorated. It might be a better rubber material, but because of that, I'm not going to worry about the condition of the pulleys here. But I did get the new belt in there, but the cover on this unit, which actually is almost one piece around 3 sides, makes it difficult to access this area back here. And this wouldn't be the problem motor to begin with, although I'm not too sure of its function at this point. I managed to get the bottom back on this case and get the circuit boards back in position. Okay, now I'm continuing to work on this VGP 150 recorder, portable cassette recorder, VCR. And in order to access this idler tire, I'm going to have to take this motor out from the back side. There is probably an unlikely chance I have an Allen wrench the size of that screw that you see sitting down there, and even if I could remove that retaining shaft mounting there, I can't pull it forward of the plastic case that's one piece down there. In other words, I've got to remove the motor from the backside. So I have to go back and disassemble the unit, and hopefully I'll be able to do better from underneath. If not, I'm sure this is probably 90% of my problem with the play mode and fast forward and rewind, even though I did accomplish some change in the unit with new belts and such. I did remove some of the mechanism to allow access to it, and before I did remove that, which sat right down here directly in front of the idler tire, right in there, I took a picture so I'd remember how to reinsert that part with the correct positioning of the legs of the thing so that it works right. I did observe that the pads that grip to the side of the over here were actually kind of glazed a little bit. So yeah, you find worn parts on these things that you can't see very well unless you look at them closely. Okay, once you get into the groove as to disassembly, it's pretty much a snap to get this back off. This took me less than 2 minutes to reposition this circuit board so that I could look at the underside of this unit. The motor that I'm speaking of is right here, and I'm hoping to be able to extract that from this side forward so I can get to the idler tire and see what the problem might be that I can clean. There was also some kind of cord wrapped on the shaft. I don't know where it came from or how it got there, and I only saw a bit of it, but I'm going to be checking that too. That might be most of the problem on this thing. And I used a desk blotter cardboard. I save these things for using on a work desk. You know, these are things that are on the back side of a calendar that you might use on a desk. They come in really very handy for a work table, and I've got that kind of over here. And I change them out usually when they get crusty, but I've got some spare material here, but it makes for a nice area to put this unit on upside down so it can be shifted around and not get scratched or damaged, because this material is pretty soft. So very basic material that you have around the house that you might keep for your hobby bench. Small bench work if you have room like I don't to work on. So now I'm kind of creeping into the laundry table here. But anyhow, I'm going to continue by trying to remove the motor sitting here and see where I can go with this. Okay, with the removal of a simple screw, I was able to back this motor out of position here. And you get a good view of the idler tire and also the obstacle I faced. There's really no easy way to identify removing this idler tire off of its position to change the idler tire. Of course, this plastic is quite yellowed with age, and as I said, there's some kind of string wedged in here underneath the wheel. I'm sure that wasn't intended, and I don't know where it came from because this unit's never been opened before, but I'm going to be exploring that. There's a possibility that that's causing some of the problems for the operation of this unit. But this motor is directly responsible for driving the play and probably rewind and fast forward of this unit. If this doesn't work right, then it's just not going to work. Okay, I was able to extract this idler tire assembly, which is really the drive, off this motor shaft. There's a bunch of small parts that you have to be wary of. And I can't even describe them by name or whatever. But I do know how they go back together. The biggest problem with this is this would be like a proprietary RCA part, is that there's like a kind of a washer. It's like almost a cloth on the back of this thing, and it's just falling apart. And I don't know if the camera shows that, but it was causing this idler tire to freeze up. Now I can easily replace the idler tire, but I'm going to have to find a way to replace this washer. That's what I call it, some kind of guide. And it's kind of almost a cloth material, and if I can't replace that, I'm not too sure I can get this to work. And I'm positive that the motor itself is fine. It just couldn't turn. It was locking up. So that's where I'm at on repairs, and this is probably going to be the key thing to fixing this VCR. I can peel off this cloth washer, but I don't want to do that right now until I know what it is or how I can find a replacement for it. to get this part off, I just had to pry the shaft off here. That was the only way to do that. Maybe one of these VCR experts out there knows how to get this kind of part. Now, here's that washer. I did take it off. It's really kind of a cloth-like washer that sits on the underside of this idler tire assembly. And that's what the problem is with getting this to work correctly. Okay, so for me, I've identified the biggest problem with this VCR being this idler tire setup that's really directly between the cassette. It drives the fast forward, rewind, probably all the functions to some degree because it's in that type of position. And this idler tire, it's not bad, but it's old, it's hard, it needs to be replaced. There's a felt washer here. I call it felt. It's more like paper, but it was recessed onto this idler pulley, and it actually caused the idler pulley to jam, which of course then the motor screams, whines, which is what you'll hear in these units when they don't work right. You'll hear whining from a motor, and that actually causes the unit to shut down because that's what this one does. So it actually has a built-in safety that way so it doesn't burn out the motor. The motor itself, I could test it. It's easy to disconnect. It's got a fairly easy disconnect connector on the board here, down here, right there. But I'm putting my faith in that this motor is fine. And just clean the top surface there, but the motor should be fine. And as far as the rest of the unit, like I said, I replaced the belts, and it's already played. I mean, I've had a tape in here. I manually turned the cassette on the follow-up reel, and it plays really good. There's no problem, no issues with the play. It's just in the actual operational mechanic part of this unit. So if I could get these parts, which appear to be easily available on the internet, I might be able to get this unit back to its glory days.